There are also a couple of concurrent talks, and what I will be doing today is some live exploratory testing, so it's possible that this will be very familiar to you, something that you do every day, and if I'm doing it right, it should be very boring. So feel free to choose another talk if that is to your liking. The tool that I'm going to be using today to take notes and also as my slides is workflowy, so I may expand the bullet points or also go into them a little bit more deeply. I guess I should say a few things about myself, because although I'm told that I'm a very important person, I don't expect you to know who I am. I work at a Dutch software company. I live in the Netherlands. I am American, which is why I sound like this. And my title is Quality Lead. I am responsible. I have a scope at Mendix of 60 teams in our research and development department. I can only help a few at a time, realistically, but there's lots to do. Every day is an adventure, is something I say most days. I'm an exploratory tester. I have a blog. It is myname.com. I am social, apparently. This is my Mastodon handle if you want to find me there. I also am a co-organizer of the open space and lean coffee that we like to call the Friends of Good Software Conference, FrogsConf. Sana, who was just on stage before me, also co-organizes this with me, as does Yoop, who gave a tutorial yesterday. So feel free to find us all, although if you find me, I have the stickers. So let's collapse that. We're going to start with what is exploratory testing. I hope that Alex gave you a good taste of that at the beginning this morning. Exploratory testing is thinking while wandering with a purpose. It is not just poking around. It is not just clicking on stuff. It is deciding where you're going and deciding if you've gotten there. And as you're testing, it is thinking about whether the thing that you're looking at matters or not, and whether you should keep going in that direction. That moment of deciding whether or not it matters is indeed what Alex described as a micro-heuristic. She's done a lot of my work for me earlier today. There are a few things I want you to look out for while I'm doing the exploratory testing. They are oracles, heuristics, and charters. You don't need to remember those words. I just want you to remember the idea of what each of those things are. An oracle is how we know whether something is a feature or a bug. It helps you separate your observation of what the software is doing from your opinion about how good or bad that is and whether this is something that needs to be fixed or whether this needs to be fixed right away. An oracle can help you name the expectation that the software is not meeting. So if you think of writing a bug report and you have the expected behavior and the actual behavior, the oracle would be the expected behavior. Heuristics are often lists of stuff. Testers love lists of stuff. Perhaps it is from another tester who has done this before. Perhaps it's from your past self. But referencing lists of stuff lets you make sure that you have covered the software that you want to in the way that you want to, that you've done deep enough testing and broad enough testing. Heuristics are often rules of thumb, and it can also be a micro heuristic, a little tiny decision in the moment. Charters are where you're going. It is your mission or your direction for your exploratory testing session. Elizabeth Hendrickson, not me, different Elizabeth, wrote a great book, Explore It, on the topic. It is from many years ago, but still very relevant. Reread it if you have already read it. And she describes charters as having three parts. The target, which is where you're exploring. The resources, which is what you're using or how you are exploring. And the information, what question you want to answer, why you are looking there at all. So for our session today, the situation that we're in is that a team had a tester quit. They have a set of automated tests on their product. All of the tests pass, and they came to me to say, can you look at the tests and help us decide whether these are giving us enough information, giving us the confidence that we need to be able to release our product? So the only assignment that I got from them was to look at the tests. And they said, we'll give you access to the code. And I said, great. And what they gave me access to was the test automation repository. And I said, I would like the access to the real code, please. Give me access to the product, and also I found a link in there, both in the test README and from the code to the API specs. I want to see those too. I want to see the entire landscape of what I'm looking at to understand what it is I'm evaluating, and when I'm looking at the tests, to be able to compare what they're testing versus what is there. What is the thing that's releasing? So that is all the part that I prepared. As you may see, this bullet point doesn't have anything in it yet because, oh yes, I know, we're not on the internet, calm down. But what we're going to do is, well, you might just have that yellow banner the rest of the time. We'll see how it happens. This is where I'll be capturing the charters and what we discover as we go and look at the application. So I've got the application, I believe, running in the front end here of my browser. I'm seeing that it's running locally. That's what the developers told me to do to get it to run, but I'm curious. Oh, let's see, where am I looking? What is my charter? Here I'm looking at the code. Oh, sorry, not the code, the browser, the front end of the application and app. And the thing that I'm noticing is that, let's see. OK, it says that it's a bookshelf application. Oh, it's running locally. That's what I was going to write down. So I am curious about local versus the cloud. Where is this application going to be deployed to? Is it an application that I will just be running on my machine the whole time? What kind of product is it? Ah, here, we have a note about this. OK, the Bookshelf app provides an API to add, update lists, and deletes books on your bookshelf. Think of it like Goodreads or the Story Graph. You may need to refresh the page to see your most recent changes here. OK, this note is helpful for me because as an avid reader and someone who has completely outsourced their to-read list to an application and outside of their brain, I'm a frequent user of now the Story Graph, previously Goodreads. So I know that that is both a social network and a place where you can collect what books you want to read, what you're currently reading, and what you have read in the past. So I see here that there's already one book in the database, and it has most of the fields filled in, but not the subtitle. I'm wondering what happens if I click the new button here. Oh, OK. So the ID number has incremented by 1. And we have a year and pages filled in. But because the others are empty, I'm wondering if I can save. Oh, I added an empty book. I don't think it would be easy to read an empty book. I don't think it would be super valuable to have an empty book in the list of books I wanted to read or that I have read. And so now I'm wondering, we could go look for, if we have a test for this, we could go look at the API specs. The thing that I want to do next, I think, is actually look at the code. The place where the code is it may not look like code very much. This is built in a low-code platform. So what I can show you, this is the domain model that we're looking at. Here's where the book is. And what I'm looking for in particular is anything in the code blocking me from adding those empty fields. I don't need to add a test that you should or shouldn't be able to have empty fields unless I see that there's something in the code that is already capturing that. So let me see here. Let's see, we've got some default values. I don't see any limitations, and I'm going to look in one more place, which is the validation rules. Ah, there are no validation rules, which is why when I tried to add an empty book on the front end, there wasn't anything. So now I'm ready to make a note that we are also curious about that. Empty book and probably any of the data validations. Like maybe there are other things that I don't have a strong intuition for myself. Is the string character length of 500 characters the perfect length for a title of a book? Is the fact that this is a bright blue text with, or bright blue background with the black text on it, and that's really hard to read? Is this an accessible thing? Is that because the product is still in beta? OK, that was a lot of things. So let's just start with validation rules. And that actually is the same as empty book. Let's remove that. And I'm noticing already here that I have a couple of things that I'm curious about. And I've already started looking. Whoop, let me remember how to go up a level. There we go. We have a different charter. We already started looking at the code. And that's where we thought about the validation rules. And I already have a couple of things I'm curious about. I tend to bring things that I am curious about and ask questions about because I am just jumping onto this team. I know that I don't have the whole context. And I am more interested in continuing to be able to explore the product and deliver interesting information to the team so that they can make their best decisions. It is less important to me that I get crowned world's best bug finder with most problems found, because that's not going to have the same effect as maintaining the relationship with the team. So another thing I want to do, in addition to not labeling these bugs, problems, rotating red light emoji, is to add some good things that we're noticing. And so let's see, a couple good things. Something about the front end of the app was that the app ran. We were able to see it. And yeah, you laugh. But part of our job as testers is to notice what is working. People want us to look at the things that are a problem, and that is not the whole scope. Ultimately, these people want to release the product, and I want to make sure that it does what it's supposed to. The code compiled, I got it to run in a browser. For a lot of projects, that is a high bar. And then looking at the code, I think a good thing there was that I had access to the code. That can also be in an enterprise situation, and if you have lots of layers of two-factor authentication, or the repo is really large, can also be a barrier to access. And then something else that I was curious about in the code was the beta label, and then the accessibility of the row and the text accessibility. And was there something else that I mentioned? The default values, the 500 or the 1900. So let's ask our product owner about those two default values. Great. OK, so what have I not looked at yet? What else do I have open? Oh, yeah, we have the API specs here. And I see that these are also pointing to local. So that at least should work if I try it out, because we saw that we had the application running. So what happens if I press the Go Use It button? Does it work? Does it do a thing? Ooh, yes. OK, so I got a response. Let's see, is it this one? Yeah. Oh, yes, indeed. I'm recognizing these numbers now, 157 and 158. There's nothing in this book, which is why I scrolled past it to be like, is this the right thing? It was because we added the empty book here. But this does match my expectations of the get API call for getting all of the books. But I'm noticing something, because I've used these open API specs before, the Swagger documentation. I'm noticing there's nothing on the right here that tells me about the security. I'm not sure how. It looks like there may not be any security on this application, so let's go and ask that as well. Let's see, we were looking, charters. We were looking at the API specs, and I want to know more, curious about the security on the app. And that kind of ties into whether the application is going to be running locally or in the cloud. If it's something that's just running on your own machine, maybe security isn't part of the first beta release that this product is going to be part of. But something else that was good was that I was able to try it out. That button worked. I was able to execute the API calls. API. Yes. Good. OK, let's see. I apparently have 5.5 minutes left of this talk. So what I'm going to do now is what my developers finally asked me to do, which was look at the tests. OK, I'm a tester. I can do that. So we're going to go open PyCharm, where I've got them open. I'm going to run the tests. Let's see, I ran them earlier. If the application is running, this should just be all green. One of my heuristics is that if the tests ran well once and everything passed, they should run well and pass again. But depending on the test data setup or the test environment that you're using, it's possible that they won't pass again. So this was at least a positive feeling indicator. I'm wondering if this gives me actually any confidence in the application, because the original question was, are we confident to release? So let's go look at the tests to decide that. There are a lot of tests, and I'm not going to be able to read them to you all, so what I'm going to do is collapse the ones so I don't get, oh no. Oh no. See, what happened here is that I see that there's a to-do in the test code, and that is not the most inspiring of confidence. I am seeing at least that there are the names of the tests are giving me a little bit of a better feeling that there seem to be, let's see, there's a get, add, update, and delete, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 calls in all. Let's see if you've got at least a coverage for, oops, wrong browser, for each of the API calls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so that probably matches. But let's go back to the tests and see what's happening. Oh, okay. So what I'm seeing here is that the syntax highlighting, before I even look at any of the words, I'm noticing that this is the color that's indicating that this test is commented out. That's what these 3 quotation marks mean in Python. Let's see if there's other nonsense here. Ooh, pass. Pass just means that the test will pass without actually running or implementing any of the code. Yes. So I think we can go deeper, but I think we probably have an answer about these tests and whether they give us the confidence to release, even without reading a lot of the test code, to say, no, we are not confident to release. We need a bit more time to dig into what's happening there. Let's see, our charter was looking at the tests. The thing that was good. Whew. Was there a good thing? OK, we had coverage for each of the API calls. That's true. The tests ran multiple times and passed. That's good. And then the thing that we're curious about, what's a polite way to inquire about this with the team that I may have to be continuing to work with? What state did the tester leave these tests in? Just where in the product life cycle are we? You asked me to look at the tests to be sure that we were going to release, but are we there yet? OK. I'm running out of time, so thus concludes the exploratory testing part of the time. But I will do now the thing that we all have to do every morning, which is stand up. OK. So here's what I did yesterday. I looked at the front end of the app. I did the code. I looked at the specs. I did get a chance to look at the tests, but I was actually, I found some good things, which is that I had access to everything. Both the API specs and the code ran. Each of the API calls had at least one positive test covered for them. I didn't get to look into the negative ones yet. But I don't think that's where our biggest risks are. I'm more curious about where and when this project is going to be released, whether that will be released on the cloud, what kind of validation we're interested in having these books on our bookshelf, whether we should be releasing if the code that we're using is still in a beta mode, and what kinds of security we're looking at for this application. So perhaps I can set aside the test portion and think about the bigger risks for you as a team. Is that something that you'd like to dive into with me? Great. OK. So yes, just a few seconds left. So I think, oh, I didn't even get to show you the HTTP status codes on the tests, because we didn't have time to read the tests. But if you have a question about that, perhaps we can look at some of the test code some more. We did see that we had some API specs. We had some code. The test passed, so that was good. The main heuristic that I used was to see everything, to see if what was there already worked, and to get access to everything that I thought I deserved, the code, the API specs, and the tests themselves. Oh, just a few more seconds. When I discovered that there weren't any validation rules or there were a bunch of default values that I wasn't sure about, rather than listing 17 bugs in Jira and sending them all to the team all at once, I decided to go up a level, go meta, take a step back, and say, I think that the thought process just hasn't occurred yet. It's not that someone actively decided that all of these are 500 characters or 200 characters. I also, luckily, was able to do this in just a few minutes because I was familiar with running this type of application. I had used the Open API spec before. I'd used PyCharm before. I'd used my terminal to run those tests before in Python. I had my virtual environment set up and activated, all of that stuff. So the thoughts I want to leave you with were, how much of this was testing? How much of this looked like testing to you? How much of this was automated? I ran those tests once. Was that enough? Was that automated testing? And how much of this would you delegate to an AI tool? Would you let some non-human worry about all of this stuff? I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for this really great presentation. We have a few minutes. Well, actually 3.5 for questions. What happens to the #curious list? How is it discussed?
Yeah, so I would start, I think, probably in a stand-up, but it would depend on my relationship with the team and the people's availability and who was the right person to have that conversation with, whether it was the tech lead or the product owner or the team lead, or everyone together in a room. But I would at least discuss it. I think this question got it right, which is that it's important to have a conversation about it rather than deciding that they are issues and logging them that way.
Thank you. Can you elaborate on why the good things you wrote were valuable?
Yeah. Testers got to get a bad rap for being too negative. Because we're always bringing problems to people and telling them about things they didn't think of, which is embarrassing and difficult to hear. If you also deliver good news, people might want to talk to you and hear from you more. And I think I mentioned this, but there has to be some balance between preserving the relationship and delivering the bad news. Just one or the other is not going to be good, sustainable work.
Okay. I'm curious why you started with the GUI interface first and not the automated tests, which is what your team's request was.
Yeah. Oops. My team is not the boss of me. I'm the boss of me. And so they can think that they are the expert and that I should do exactly what they tell me to do. But I've been doing this for a lot of years. And I know that if I just look at the tests, that is not how I'm going to be finding the biggest risks. And indeed, that's exactly what we found today.
Nice. Okay. What course or learning exercises do you recommend to improve in QA and/or scripting?
I recommend getting your code reviewed by you, is here all the time. That's been really useful for learning Python. I realize that's not a scalable solution. Oh, also Christopher Nordstrom teaches a course in Python for testers. That's a slightly more scalable solution. I practiced writing Python with the Python koans as well, K-O-A-N-S. Let me write that down, Python koans. So if you Google that, there's some GitHub repo where you practice reading the Python errors and then knowing what Python to write correctly based on the error messages. There's nothing quite like getting an error message in your terminal and being too scared to Google it. That'll get you past that point.
Okay, please, a quick answer, okay? A dedicated exploratory tester, question mark. How did you get to the specialization without one of your superiors asking you to do other types of testing?
Oh, I think this goes to my earlier answer, which is I'm the boss of me.
Very good. I asked for a very quick reply. You did that. Big applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the wonderful Elizabeth.